Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode three of
Three.
Close Corners. Episode three. Great to be here. Joined once again. You know him, you love him. Holden. Me and Ty Holden and Tyler coming back at you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you for
General,
having me, Tyler.
you're very welcome. I'm glad to have you. Glad to have you. So today we thought we might have a less, maybe not less focused, but a
Less
less
structured.
less rigid conversation. Today we'd like to talk to you about just general music, whatever comes to mind, maybe what we appreciate in music or why we gravitate towards it or just
Or
yeah,
what we're listening to recently and why we like it.
so true.
Oh,
That
you
could work
know.
as well.
Which, speaking of Tyler, is there anything specifically you've been listening to recently that you like?
Anything,
That you've been thinking about a lot, that's been making you wonder?
hmm, it's hard to say. Recently I was listening to early Outcast because
Oh,
just
wow.
because the Andre 3000 flute album has been on my mind. And for those who don't know about that, I think it was last year, like late last year, Andre 3000 made his explosive return back to the music scene with a flute album, and nobody was expecting it. But
It's
it's an amazing album, and I would definitely recommend it.
Word. Well, tell me what you like about it. I
Word.
think from what I heard about this record, Andre 3000, it's been like his first record in like well, last record came out 2007, so like
Mm,
16 years. And
yeah.
it seems to have like a lot of influence from like new age and like ambient kind of
Hmm.
stuff.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely very timeless, just beautiful, relaxing music. And I think the ethos and everything is really cool too. Like the first track being called "I Swear I Really Wanted to Make a Quote Unquote Rap Album, but this is literally the way the wind blew me this time." I think it's such a great way to start it, just being like, "Hey guys, I know you wanted that rap album, but I'm on my flute stuff right now," and I respect that. And it's really just all the composition's very beautiful. His playing is immaculate. There's a lot of interesting production too. It while it is like that flute album, there is still some interesting things going on in the production, interesting like effects and I don't want to call it like glitch, but there's definitely some cool stuff going on. And I just think
it's kind of
uh,
like a there's some like electronic sounds in there, you'd
mhm,
say. Yeah.
mhm. I think yeah, definitely what drew me and probably most people to really give the project a chance was probably the track names. A couple of which I can't repeat on a show as esteemed as this, but uh something like
The second one I really like. I wish we could say it right
yeah.
now, but I think that
uh
one's my favorite one.
yeah, I like the night in Hawaii when I turned into a panther and started
So-
making these low register purring tones that I couldn't control. Shit was wild. He spelled it with a yen symbol there. I think
Oh,
it's
that is
really
a yen symbol.
yeah, I think it's really just the most recent opus from a gifted musical mind.
93 till infinity and Beyonce.
No, yeah,
Dreams once
definitely.
buried beneath the dungeon floor slowly sprout into undying gardens. That one is a very nice one.
That's very beautiful.
That's very poetic.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, and I think as just like a wider thing of music, I just think that this is so outside of what I would typically listen to. And though I have listened to things like gosh, I feel like a poser right now. Pharaoh, what was his name?
Barry Sanders.
Pharaoh Sanders. Yes, I definitely appreciated his work in the past, but I've never really explored it past that. This is kind of a similar vibe. I like it. Um, but I definitely think that uh, just music as a whole, there's so many different sounds, there's so many things to appreciate. Um, and just really being able to see the full breadth of everything and really just appreciate all the sounds that come to your ears, it's definitely something that I feel,
Right.
that I enjoy of music.
One of the things that I thought to that kind of like seeing a lot of these track titles
Mm,
makes me think about like is just kind of like how like a lot of music has started to become, I feel maybe a little bit less serious. Does that make sense? Like there's
I
a
I would agree.
I feel like there's a little bit less expectation of how people are so supposed to be, what they're supposed to do.
Hmm.
And I feel like artists, especially you know, artists in like their later years, um are really like embodying that. Like, you know, Andre 3000 is so like known for making like hip hop records, and also, you know,
Hmm.
of course being on like Outkast, but um which I would say I have unfortunately not listened to a single Outkast record yet.
Hmm. I
And
would
I should I
definitely. Stankonia is definitely an essential for
yeah.
anybody. I would say Stankonia is a very good of its time, great, just great album. You know, it's a great rap
Yeah,
album.
I was really thinking about getting that one, but just like looking at these names, it's like I feel like for the most part, you're not really hearing song names that are describing the sounds, but
Hmm.
they're just more kind of like, it's just like funny. It's just kind of like
Yeah.
ridiculous, like a set of words put together.
Hmm.
And I think even if that is not necessarily describing entirely the sound, it's at least describing, I feel like, the ethos
Hmm.
behind Andre 3000 going into making this album, which is like, I feel like when this came out, like a new age or ambient album is probably the last thing they like most of his
Right.
fans would probably expect from, you know, someone who had been making hip hop music for such a long time.
Hmm.
So like kind of like I feel like, you know, there's something just so relaxing about um I feel like there really is something so relaxing about like not caring about like what it is that you're doing, and what, you know, people may think, and, you know, if like if it feels like this or it does that, but that like it's just Andre, you know. I imagine making the music that he'd like to make, like just
Hmm.
so deep down, without like, you know, any apology for it, and just like being himself, and really like just like as he is, he's able to, you know, he's able to do what he wants and enjoy it, you know.
Hmm.
So I think that's really like that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. To go back to your earlier point about music becoming less serious, um, I think that has a lot to do with the decentralization of music. I think the fact that anyone can make anything and upload it any way they want for people to enjoy and appreciate. I
Right.
I definitely think although the hand of corporate greed, you know, still does affect the music industry in a major way. I think that for you know, bedroom producers, there's no better time to be putting your work out to the world. I think that we're in a really in an age of media freedom, especially musical freedom, because there's so much that is able to be iterated upon and you know, maybe not reinvented, but you know, no, I would say there's an element of like reinventing it, sound reinventing itself, but because it is the internet and everyone in the world can interact and collaborate, that reinvention happens very rapidly. I think that we're really in an age of like uh significant musical like what's the word, evolution, as opposed to
Right.
maybe in previous times. Well, of course, when you look back 30, 40, 50 years ago, there were very groundbreaking and important experimental acts. It was a lot harder for that stuff to get off the ground.
Right.
um
And it was because uh it was more so because, you know, they people did not really have access to finding out about this music as like, you know, people like us would today, you know.
mhm,
Like most of the time, to find out about something that was maybe like kind of like a little bit like obscure or underground, you kind of had to like go into like a record store and like look at like see some records and be like, okay,
mhm,
I like this looks interesting.
mhm,
And like, you know, like there wasn't like you couldn't like taste, you couldn't get a taste for it. You had to
mhm,
like buy it, and if you didn't like the record, then like, oh shit, well I spent money on this, so
Yeah.
um and
And that
but
is if they're even lucky enough to hit the record store shelves. And I think that
that too. You,
more important to the propagation of early experimental was probably uh like regional, cultural, just like you see some guy in a basement playing some crazy stuff, and you
yeah,
learn to appreciate experimental that way.
right.
Uh,
A lot
but
of word of mouth
right.
too, you know.
And I think that still does exist. I think that some of my most beloved, music has come from people recommending it or from internet word of mouth on forums or in like YouTube comments.
Right.
I think that is that ability of music to propagate itself and really just gives you something to there's always something new. You're never out of music where in maybe in the past, I can't speak to it myself because I wasn't there, but it really seems that it would be much easier to get pigeonholed into maybe a few genres or just the things that the record company wanted you to hear.
Oh, right.
And bootlegs and DIY. I mean, Daniel Johnston,
Yeah.
pioneering that kind of sound, that kind of idea. That, was a
I would
rarity for its time.
I apologize to correct. I
Sure.
would actually take that back to R. Stevie more specifically.
Hmm.
He was he, I think, what's his face? Daniel Johnson was very important
Hmm.
to, um, like, outsider music and like kind of like being this really like unique, one of a kind, like odd figure that was making the music that they were. It was kind of like oddball in a way.
Hmm.
But if we're talking about like home recording and like really taking up the like everything from the like playing every instrument, doing all the vocals, all that, like recording everything all by yourself, without all that like label stuff and whatnot, then I think that I would give that to R. Stevie more.
You're probably right. I'm less familiar with that body of work, but I've heard the name. What are they known for
So
specifically?
R. Stevie Moore has a record called I know him for his record called Phonography. Um I think a great song or slash music video of his as like a great introduction to his music is uh uh I think it's called Part of the Problem,
Hmm.
and you can kind of see if you watch that video, which I think some came out either in the late 80s or early 90s, I forget exactly when.
Hmm.
You can see that a lot of the aesthetics that like come through in R. Stevie Moore's songs, sounds, and visuals
Hmm.
are definitely what like translated into uh like a huge fan of his work, Ariel Pink, which I feel
Hmm.
like Ariel Pink would eventually be like the next like leading figure of like this like very um like culturally reflective DIY sound,
Hmm.
the like, making all the instrumentals and singing, like having basically being having like hands-on control of every part of the music making process and
Hmm.
presentation. And I feel like that was very important to especially a lot of the music that exists today, because like, now that, because back then a lot of that lo-fi music that like, R. Stevie Moore, Daniel Johnston, and like Ariel Pink were like working with, um they were working with, the kind of like the home accessibility of like using cassettes. There's a lot of
Hmm.
cassette culture, right?
Right.
Or at least more so, cassette culture did not become much more. I think it did not become much more heavier until like the early 2000s, which I guess is where Ariel Pink came
Hmm.
or in. Um, but I think a lot of like the cassette stuff started to expand around in like the mid 2000s, where with a lot of these like ambient and drone artists who were also kind of making tape music, but
Mhm.
people called it like the blog spot scene. It's kind of in one way, it's almost like it almost felt like a cousin of like a lot of like the like hypnagogia kind of stuff that like James Ferraro and like the skaters and Spencer Clark were kind of like uh doing. A lot of notable people in that realm are like um Emeralds, Z- Z- Xenofinidae. I forget the name, but like
Mhm.
a lot of it, like I felt like it was a new step into like it was very much inspired by like a Cosmiche music, which was coming from krautrock, and that was a very early time of artists making not only just like making these new worlds with electronic music, but how much like you know like aesthetic kind of like really tied into making those worlds, and it kind of changed it around into like ambient and drone. um um I mean that existed in Cosmic music a lot, but um I think it this time around with like the blogspot scene played more into like the lo-fi like tape sound of it. So
Mhm.
um going back to like the accessibility of using this gear, um you know, the what allowed like artists like Daniel Johnston, R. Stevie Moore, and Ariel Pink to make the music that they did was because, you know, they could get like a cheap like tape recorder, and you know all they would have to do is like record themselves playing something, layer it. They can, you know, use their effects, edit it, and that's because, you know, from the very beginning, like even like when like studio recording like techniques to like manipulate sound and audio was, you know, able to be a thing in like the 1940s, maybe even earlier, with like music concrete, where you can like record like environmental sounds and, you know, mess around with the studio to like change those sounds around, like move them around with tape. That
Mhm.
was a way that people were able to take sound, like record sound, and then like manipulate it, and
Mhm.
you know, manipulate, layer, effect, all of that. So now taking that all the way up um to like today's standards, you know, everyone, you know, more so has accessibility to a computer. That computer could
Mhm.
either be their phone, that could be their laptop, anything of what sort, you know. So, and what's allowed that to do is not only have access to making, you know, music or like
Mhm.
recording things, but you have access to, you know, everything from the audio front to the visual front. You know,
Mhm.
you can make you can make your music on your computer. You can make an album cover on your computer. You can mix and master, and you know, also upload like your music online from that same computer, you know.
Right.
And I think what gives it that, you know, well, that's it's kind of like beautiful that like people are able to do that now. And to go back to your point about like the decentralization of like the music industry, I think people are coming to see that, like, you know, all that, you know, this idea of this clean sound, you know, is you know, it's I think it's a way of going about things, but I don't think I, you know, necessarily need that to be myself, to make the music that I want to do, you know.
Mhm.
Like a lot of most of the time music, like, you know, a lot of these labels aren't going to, like, at least big labels aren't going to be releasing, you know, really dirty sounding albums. They want them to be very clean because they want them to be somewhat approachable,
Mm,
even despite whether these are like experimental records or not, somewhat approachable on a um on like a release scale, you know? So
mhm,
um I think this gives the ability for artists to play around with you know, having like the mixing and mastering, like basically the medium of which the music is interpreted, whether that is a clean mix or
mhm,
it's fucking noisy and saturated, or it sounds like it's being played through a telephone, where
mhm.
like aesthetic purposes outweigh the commercial purposes. And like, and you can have, I guess you can have both in one way, but sometimes the aesthetic purposes can be very much can be the very thing that prevents something from being commercial in a way,
Mhm.
um which I think people really want. I think most artists today are like want that, because that aesthetic, through like how they shape that sound beyond it just being like a clean mix or whatever, is a way of emphasizing their music to the fullest extent that they possibly can, you know.
Right. And I
And
think there always
yeah, go
has
ahead.
been a rift between uh pop viability and, what the artist truly wants to do. I mean, if you look at any interview with a musician from like ever, there's always going to be compromises for commercial release.
Hmm.
Um to the extent to where it could even break up a band, commercial
Right.
disagreement or just like legal battles with your label.
All the times that yeah, like literally all the times that bands have broken up because of like something money related, you
Mhm.
know, and like creative differences, and like all led by, you know, led by the financials of it, you know.
Mhm. And I think that the with anything, uh, you know, nothing is truly evil. I think that the commercial aspect of music, it's just a natural progression of our everything around us. Everything is commercial, everything is sold, everything is purchased. But I do think there's an element to that that is positive. I think, before everyone had access to whatever they wanted whenever they wanted it, it was through the support of record labels and in private, investors or anything like that to really get stuff off the ground and get it into people's ears. And I think that some of our most like not only artistically significant works of the past, well, since the beginning of recorded music, uh, we have to, there is an extent of thanks, to the fact that we have these recordings archived and we can listen to them whenever we want. The music industry is evil and destroys artists all the time, but it's like we wouldn't have that music without them. And I think that's really the catch 22 in a lot of angles and pockets of our society is it has to be a compromise between, you know, economic gain and aesthetic choice. I think I think it's a fair argument to say in pretty much all media, there's a balance to be struck when you're working commercially. And I do think, that is definitely the appeal of modern music is the ability for people to have people listen to their stuff without having to pander to commercial release at all. Many independent artists still do commercialize their music as they should because it is work and they deserve to be paid, obviously. Uh, but like being able to upload on Bandcamp and have 3 or 4 or 5 people buy your album, but they still bought your album. I think that's an amazing thing. I really don't think there's ever been a better time to be a music fan than right now. There's
But
just
yeah,
there's so
absolutely.
much happening. There's so much uh, developing every day. But then also we still have access to everything that came before for the most part. I mean, you lose stuff or tape degrades and stuff gets forgotten, but what sticks around and what we're able to hold on to, the really great stuff, we still have and we're still able to draw inspiration from. And I think that's going to be like an exponential effect, as the more catalog of great music and amazing ideas we have are able to build up and we'll still have cyclical access to everything. It's just going to pave the way for even more creative and beautiful sounds coming in the future. And so yeah, I'm very, I feel like I'm lucky almost. I'm very fortunate to be in the time I am and in the place I am where I can, I mean, we're doing a podcast about it, you know? It's just, it's a great
Right.
thing.
And I think like to add to that is um what I feel like at this point in time, there's another thing that you're talking about, like, oh, like listen to this label for this sound, and you are like you like these genres and
Hmm.
stuff like that, or like you like this genre more specifically, like um I feel like the fact um that like what like music is changing in the way it is that you know it's I think music is less focused on being a certain genre, but more so like the the aesthetic of it
Hmm.
is more important than like what genre is that
Hmm.
like I think like you know I feel like a lot of the time people just see like an album cover and they're like, I like this, and
Right.
they're like, yeah, the music sounds exactly what this album cover sounds like.
Hmm.
And um also I think to if we're talking from like a perspective of like a music that puts you somewhere,
Hmm.
you know anywhere in time or whatever, like feel like it doesn't matter what exactly that music is, but that it's kind of like that it kind of like has its way of characterizing it. Like I think something that comes to mind um is um is like a like Last American Hero by
Hmm.
James Ferraro, which is like one my definitely my favorite record by him. And I
Me as well.
think I think for the reason being is that um I mean him as an artist alone, has made music ranging from so many different genres, but I think it's like what it's kind of apparent to me is that it doesn't really matter what he doesn't stay in one genre, but that
Hmm.
he operates within different genres to create like a to get closer to a vibe and a sound. So
Hmm.
like if this aesthetic is like, oh, like get like large gated like senior citizen communities that are ran by that are basically almost like consumerist bubbles that like almost like feel like like deserts of consumerism in a way,
Hmm.
um that are also just like um that are just I lost it, but anyways, like
Right. I get what
like
you're aiming at.
how you get close it's like all right, what sounds like could do that, especially in the satirical sense, like using like these like cheap Casio keyboards and making it sound like a country, kind of like Americana in a way, but also
Right.
making it feel futuristic, like I feel like there's no point in being like oh sorry, as like an artist, as an artist being like, I'm gonna stay in this genre,
Hmm.
like I feel like music, personally I feel like music making can be so much more descriptive beyond the
Right.
genre, but like
And we've
what
had this,
sounds could be like more like expressive of it.
right. We've had this conversation just like on our own time in the past about the application of genre as both a limiter as well as, a tool to catalog music. What is your what is your modern stance on the like the nature of genre, because I think the basic theme we're getting at for the most part is that music is expanding very rapidly and in so many different pockets. Do you think that genre is becoming, what's the word I'm looking for? Not decentralized, but like de uh what's the word when you put something first? Like when you
It's
prioritize, deprioritized. I think the genre is becoming to an extent deprioritized. And I know that we've had discussions about genre tags, even like pigeonholing stuff. What do you
Yeah.
think?
So actually, I think there goes two ways. I'm gonna first
Mhm.
give my experience of it, because I think the fact that like if I am approaching things from um an a discovery point, the
Mhm.
genre is quite helpful for me to find the
Right.
things that I like, or want to find. Like if I want to, specifically like find like, Bolivian folk music, like
Right.
I can you know type that in and then find something very similar to that, because you know someone is able to like listen to something and say like, okay, this is very close to this description. I remember like for a long time I was especially very interested in like a music that was like kind of like a combination of like experimental rock and post punk.
Mhm.
And um I was able to find some of like my favorite music ever out of like those, you know the combination of those like genre terms.
Mhm.
um and so I think where this leads me to say is that there's I don't I think what happens is that these terms can be helpful in description. The problem can be when we give those terms much more meaning than they, I guess, entirely deserve, if that makes sense.
Yes.
like like I think, like, if anything, the things that people make are more than just the like the definitions that they get put on top of them. So really what I kind of see is almost a polar it's more so a polarization. It's that music is becoming less and less. There's the side that music is becoming less and less emphasized about genre,
Mhm.
um and because I think at the end of the day it's just about, the feeling of it, the not really, it's just, or the aesthetic of it more
Mhm.
so, rather than like what genre it actually is. But also I can't help but feel that because of the implosion of kind of like meaning that we give in these analytical editorial um ways of going about music,
Mhm.
that at the same time I feel that it's also like a lot of these terms become very hyper specific.
Yes.
Like, we I think people want to find more things to specifically define. But I personally
Right.
feel that if that continues on, a lot of those terms will kind of just, I don't know, lose their meaning,
Right. There's
because
a lot of genres. I think a new genre is born every day. I think anybody who's browsing Rate Your Music, which I often do,
and same.
it's sometimes like it's almost comedic sometimes, and not to disparage any specific art or but just like some genre tags are so niche and hyper specific that it really just seems like the end point. Like where how can the genre progress past this point? And I think at that point genre can become not damaging but limiting. I think that
Yeah.
people I think and I'm not a musician extensively, but I think that starting musically on a project with a I'm gonna make this genre, I think that could be, that can be limiting. And I think we've had that conversation as well, where I think in your band, it's difficult, if not really reasonable, to, assign genre tags because you just want to make the sounds you want to make.
Yeah.
And that can become a challenging question.
Right. And I think like, I think really what I feel is like, okay, like I want to make, I think keeping it broad is at least like good.
Hmm.
Like I want to make, saying something like I want to make rock music.
Right.
Like, but like rock is so expansive that it's like, okay, there's a foundation, but what will this how will this be characterized, like because like I feel like you could take rock into so many different ways, or
Hmm.
you know I want to make electronic music, I want to make experimental music, I want to make blues, I want to make jazz.
Hmm.
So I think like I think it comes down a lot to the hyper specificness of it,
Right.
like because I think really like these genres, like like names and all that kind of stuff can be quite helpful in like kind of like establishing kind of like a ballpark
Hmm.
in which some like the something sounds like, or if you want to make something like something that feels similar to this or whatever.
Right.
But um I think it very much can sometimes be the the hyper specificness of it can be like helpful, but also
Hmm.
sometimes very very damaging in a way, because it's like
Right.
maybe if there's like a very 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 specific sound. Like I was actually really what was really awesome was um like for example, I really love I love um Echo, like Chuck Person Echo Jams Volume
Hmm.
1. And the thing was that I wanted a lot more stuff like that,
Hmm.
but even a lot of the things under Vaporwave didn't have a like didn't entirely feel so much the same as that.
Hmm.
Um but that was they until like the term echo jams was like used as a is now like a genre that you can like look up and find things cataloged under that genre. And then
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, now I can find things that are very close to this sound. That's where you have the genre, and then you have the subgenres. And a lot it's mostly that the subgenres are the most like are tend to be the most hyper specific.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today as we talked about whatever came to our minds. I'm thinking that's probably going to be the episode structure from here on out. I hope you like it because we do. So it's going to be a lot of that.
Yep.
We will, of course, talk about, like specific things, but I think the freedom provided by just a mono or a dialogue, you know, leads to more interesting content. So we're gonna do that.
Yeah, I
Excellent.
agree. I agree. Thank you
Well,
so
that's
much, everybody.
thank you everybody. Thank you. We'll be back around. You can't get rid of us, not yet. Get ready. All right,
Yep.
bye
Take care.
everybody. Bye.